free all political prisoners. I have something written down too. And it's not because I can't remember all I have to say, is that I have to remember to say all that needs to be said around Jericho 98 and Jericho itself. First of all, I'd like to say it's really, really great to see so many of you out tonight. And because even though I've been here since Thursday and I've spoken a number of different places, that this is the biggest audience, I guess you could say the radio audience was the biggest audience. But so many of you came out when you could have been at the movies and you could have been dancing somewhere or home resting after a hard week of work or whatever, and in the Chicago cold. And you could have said that this is not an important issue because it didn't affect you, because the work you're doing is not work that's around political prisoners. But somehow or another, I hope that you will know and understand that if you're doing any kind of political work in the United States, any kind of revolutionary work or militant work or activist work, or anything that is not enforcing the status quo, then you're in danger of becoming a political prisoner. And if you don't know it, then maybe as early as tomorrow when you walk outside, you will know it. Or in the case of what's happening around the MLN and the National Committee here in Chicago with the COINTELPRO work that's going on, with people around you and the FBI knocking on people's doors, by the end of the summer, you may know it. And so, I want to talk about Jericho in that context. Because Jericho didn't just fall out of the sky. It's not something that we made up yesterday. It's not something that we just started working on and 18 months ago. In and of itself, Jericho is a combination of years and years and years of work around the issue of political freedom for our political prisoners, prisoners of war. And the Republic of New Africa, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, has been doing Jericho marches for at least 10 years. But it's been done in a vacuum. Few people, only those people who actively recognize themselves as citizens of the provisional government and who attend Nation Day, wherever it's held, have been involved in Jericho marches. So Jalil Abdul Muntakin, a citizen of the Republic of New Africa, a political prisoner, prisoner of war, said to us about 18 months ago that we need to do a Jericho 98. He didn't say Jericho 98, he wanted to do a Jericho 96. But I said to him that we take time, we need to do time to make this thing as big as it can if we're going to do it right. So it became Jericho 98. He said we need to bring the issue of political prisoners out of the closet and put it on the front burner. And for those of us who have been doing political prisoner work, we knew how hard it is to get the support necessary to raise the issue of political prisoners to the height that it needs to be brought to. And those of us who were doing work around the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal knew that it was possible for us to do this, because we had done it with the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. We had made Mumia Abu-Jamal almost a household word, and we had shown the power of the people in stopping the execution of Mumia Abu-Jamal. But we also recognized those of us who knew about the instances of other political prisoners on death row. And in a lot of cases, Mumia attests to it himself, that the issue with Mumia was that Mumia was the only political prisoner on death row. But Mumia denies the fact that he's the only political prisoner on death row. But we had to do something to raise the issue of that they're about to execute a political prisoner. And if they executed Mumia Abu-Jamal, then what would they do to us with all the support that he had? So we had to show them, we had to draw a line of demarcation and tell the state that you can't cross this line when we're without political prisoners. But while we were doing that, Zion Israel was executed in Indiana. Zion Israel was not known. It was 2 weeks, a month before his execution, that the issue of Zion Israel became an issue that those of us in New York knew and understood about. And before that we could wage a campaign to stop his execution, he was executed. So we understood, we began to see clearly that we could not just raise the issue of one political prisoner, or 15 political prisoners, or 3 political prisoners in a vacuum. That we had to do something about people understanding that those political prisoners the government had to do hands off on our political prisoners. And so, we looked at how often political prisoners were coming home. We looked at the fact that Dhoruba bin Wahad, after declaring his innocence for over 19 years, finally came home in 1990 after 19 years in prison, and everyone knew, and the state had the evidence that he wasn't guilty of what he was doing time for. We looked at 7 years later in 1997, Geronimo Jaga came home after 27 years. And the government again knew that Geronimo Jaga was not guilty. But that innocence of guilt was not the issue. The fact that these people went to prison because of their activities on behalf of liberation struggles, independence movements, and activities to bring an end oppression of oppressed people in this country was the issue. And while they had laid their lives, put their lives out there on the line and been victimized by this society and was tried and convicted as criminals when the government knew that these were political movements going on, and this was the issue that we had to look at. And we had a responsibility to deal with this issue. And as political people, we had dropped the baton. We had allowed this to continue over the years and have put forth no strategy or tactic designed to make sure that this did not continue. When the incarceration of our brothers and sisters was by design of the government, they had put together a strategy to make sure that our movements were destroyed and our finances were eroded and that our people were in prison and that the movements were in the streets were not there. That movement, that strategy that they put forth started in 1968. We had political prisoners before 1968, but they put in writing in 1968 with their letterhead memorandum of 1968 that, and J. Edgar Hoover orchestrated the fact that these movements had to be neutralized, and these leaders of these movements had to be neutralized, and these people had to be taken off the streets, and then by any means that they could deal with it doing that, even if the evidence was not there to substantiate the charges that they were brought against these people. But they would, because they had the criminal justice system in their pocket, the courts in their pockets, the police in their pockets, and all of them worked together in a concerted effort to make sure that the government continued to exist as is, and all of these struggles were neutralized. They're able to do this. And the fear, tactics, and everything else at the hands of COINTELPRO were methods that he used to do this. And it worked, because our people went off to jail, organizations were destroyed, and the people languished in jails for years and years and years. And there were ebbs and flows in the support that was gotten for these political prisoners and prisoners of war. So, where did the term Jericho 98 come from? If any of you, some of you might have been to church at one time or another. Some of you might still go to church. I know Reverend Yusaka back there from the, Yashitaki. I'm sorry I'm mispronouncing your name, but I'll get it right one day. But you know, the heart is in the right place. I'm sure you understood in the biblical text of Jericho when Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho, and he marched around the walls of Jericho with the noise makers and everything else, and 7 times he circumnavigated those walls of Jericho until the walls, and he laid siege to those walls until the walls came tumbling down. That's where Jericho comes from. And the walls we were talking about laying siege, to is the walls that incarcerate our brothers and sisters inside the prisons and jails of America, of Babylon. And we intend to lay siege to it in such a way that the government of the United States will no longer be able to deny the existence of political prisoners in this country. And when Rage talks about amnesty, and when it talks about amnesty for political prisoners in all the other countries around the world and human rights violations, that these countries, we're going to make it so that these countries will be able to say to them, what about these political prisoners in your country? You can't talk to us about human rights violations because you have it having right in your country right there. And these are these people. They have faces, they have names, and this is what you tried them for, and this is what they were involved in. So we intend to make this so prevalent, so well known, that the United States government will no longer be able to deny the existence of political prisoners inside the boundaries of the United States. And so that's what Jericho is all about. The other thing, Jericho is also designed so that one part of that letterhead memorandum in 1968 was that they, as I said, they could take us out of the communities and organizing, away from our organizing efforts around all those other oppressive the issues. We don't have the time to deal with the fact that the prisons are rising over and over again and all our people being thrown behind the bars in prisons. That they're used, and where shadow slavery does not exist in the streets, that it exists behind the walls of these prisons. And they're being used as economic slave labor inside the walls. We don't have time for that because we're dealing with the issue of our brothers and sisters going back and forth to jail, and we're dealing with making sure that families are taken care of, and we're dealing with making sure that their treatment is being handled. But if we build a prison organization like Jericho to deal with the issues of making sure that the political prisoners of these organizations are taken care of, then our other organizations, we can go back in the community and do our work of freeing our communities, freeing our people in an oppression and oppressive conditions that affect us as a people. But they did their job well. They did it so well that some of us are afraid to go back and organize anymore because we're wondering who's going to deal with us if we get and we're picked up off the street as political prisoners. And if we're wondering that, then we're not out there doing what we should be doing. We're worried about the fact because our practice has shown we won't deal with the issue of freedom for our political prisoners. So we have to build. Jericho is designed to take that responsibility off individual organizations and give it to one group of people under one umbrella to deal with the issue of amnesty and freedom for our political prisoners, and deal with the issue of adequate medical care for our political prisoners, and deal with the issue of making sure they get visits and commissary and adequate legal defenses and everything else. And we have to do that if we intend to be about the job of creating revolution in America. And we have to have strategies and tactics designed to make sure that this is viable. And we can't do that in a vacuum. In the 30 years of being of a lull in our struggle, of progression in our struggle, show we're not capable of doing this. The 30 years where the government has been able to marshal its forces and plan for the next resurgence of revolutionary activities in this country. And the fact that we're not planning, we're not strategizing, we're not making it so that we can move our struggle from level to another, shows that we need to be about the business of building strategies and tactics. And Jericho 98 is part of that strategy. And it's across racial lines, it's across organizational lines, it's across movement lines to deal with. It encompasses the Puerto Rican independence movement. It encompasses the American independence movement, American Indian movement, and the League of Indigenous Sovereign Nations, that Native American movement. It encompasses the North American anti-imperialist people forces. It encompasses the Japanese and the Asians and all of those struggles that are going on for national liberation inside this country. And all of us, quiet as it kept, it's something I never thought would happen. We're working together on a single issue, or building something to move us from one level to another. If we're able to raise the issue and deal with this Jericho project and raise the issue to the point where we'll get them to acknowledge the fact that political prisons exist, de facto, they're acknowledging the fact that we're involved in revolutionary struggles in this country. So understand very clearly, this is not an isolated incident. This is not something without a plan and a strategy and tactics. This is not something that we go and do just a march around the White House. This is something designed to begin the real work after March 27th. March 27th and the demonstration at the White House and the march and the bill is designed to send a message to Washington that we're prepared to make those sacrifices necessary to build a movement in this country that moves step by step from one level to the next until we secure our freedom and our liberation. And Jericho 98 is a very good, big part of that, because it's going to free us up to do the other work that we need to be about doing. And what is the strategy? The strategy began almost 18 months ago was to educate people about the existence of political prisoners in this country, to put a face to these political prisoners, and to bring it out in the open to those people who have never dealt with the fact that political prisoners exist. Over the last 18 months, people have come on board in the struggle around the issue of political prisoners that didn't even know political prisoners exist, had never heard of it before. And in little towns all across America, they are putting together their forces to go to Washington on March 27th. They're bringing in, you got something that's going around the country right now called the Political Prisoner Rap Tour. You know, where these young white rappers and black rappers and multicultural rap are going around on campuses campuses helping to raise money for buses to go to Washington. You know? And this is something that people thought would never happen. That the youth are rapping for political prisoners. You know? And you know, people thought that this whole rap thing was something we should not support. But they're supporting political prisoners, so I support them. You know? In Lilly, Louisiana, a minister got up in his pulpit on November 9th and preached a sermon called Jericho. And in his sermon, he talked about how Christians have failed in their duties to deal with the incarcerated people, people in prison. And then he talked about what their responsibility as Christians was. And he talked about Joshua and the battle and the circumnavigation of the walls of Jericho. And then at the end of his sermon, he talked about Mumia Abu Jamal. And he talked about Geronimo Gijaga. And he talked about all those political prisoners that the church, Christians should be about supporting. And it's about going to see about. And doing their Christian duty of freeing the political prisoners and the incarcerated. If the ministers in a little town in Lilly, Louisiana can talk about that, and they were not exposed to the issues and the struggles, then what about those of us who were exposed to it? We have not we abdicated our responsibility to these political prisoners and to ourselves? One of the things that we're doing is we're pulling together people from all of those walks of life. And a lot of issues, people that we've had contradictions with over the years, those contradictions fade in the comparison to the job that we have before us. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make people understand that we have an enemy out there that's much bigger than the fact that we have problems among ourselves. And that enemy is what has to unify us to do what we need to do to overcome them. And the strategy, again, is to build the strongest case for amnesty and freedom for our political prisoners, utilizing the first step that we're utilizing is those people who went to prison. So we on that list that breaks those walls of denial down is those people that we can show without a shadow of a doubt that their cases from the beginning to the end came out of their struggles and their political struggles on the streets. Once we break down the walls, our next phase will be for those people who became political behind the walls, and their sentences have been lengthened, and they've been under inhumane conditions behind the fact that inside prison they became political. And they took up the struggle from inside the prison walls. And we have a lot of them. I think the most well-known case that we knew was George Jackson, who gave his life to save the life of other political prisoners inside the walls, and they shot him down behind the walls in the prisons. And then you have the Ruchell McGee and Hugo Purnells. And right here in Illinois, you have Atiba Shana and others like that. But we have to be strong enough. And then the third phase is we deal with those people who, because of the conditions in the street, the economic conditions and the racial conditions in the street, are victimized as oppressed people who don't even know that the government is oppressing them. All they know is that they're knocking their heads against a strong wall. And we have the job, the responsibility, as those of us who are enlightened, who are educated, who are political, to go out and wage the struggle to end the oppression and end the use of them as slave labor inside the prison camps, and to build companies like the Lexus, and build companies like Motorola, and all those companies that are making millions off the backs of those people who are inside the walls of slave labor, and who are going in revolving door labor camps. So Jericho is a big endeavor, but we can do this. Because if we're already involved in organizing and politicizing in the streets, then we understand the significance of building a movement, of building an institution to deal with the issue of political prisoners. So that while we're organizing, we don't have to worry about who's going to deal with us when we go behind the walls. And so I encourage you to get involved with Jericho. Get involved with the people who are working and understand that the political prisoners inside the walls understand the importance of Jericho. And over again, I get letters from them saying, this is a fresh hope and real light that we've seen at the end of a tunnel for the struggle that we became involved in, whose renewed life, and for us to go ahead and carry out what our agenda was from the very beginning, and that's to create the revolution in America. Thank you. On to Jericho. Going back to the whole Mumia campaign from the very beginning, the International Political Prisoners Unite to Save Mumia Abu Jamal. that apparatus that was developed there with the whole political prisoners from around the world in support of the saving the life of Mumia, that apparatus didn't just stop. It didn't go away. And we transformed that into the whole issue of support for political prisoners and international level. And a lot of the different countries, they're going to be having solidarity acts on the same day in the various countries at U.S. embassies. And matter of fact, the first week of March, I'm going to Toronto and I'm speaking there during that week around Jericho here. We have had people, Kazi Touré, a former political prisoner, went to South Africa and talked to members of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission down there, and they're raising the issue of freedom for political prisoners here in this country. And one of the things they're talking about doing is sending a representative from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission from South Africa here to Washington to participate in Jericho. So and the other thing, countries who've actually stood up for it, and the first and foremost country that has been in support of our political prisoners has been Cuba. Cuba has been under sanction for a number of years, but they have also about the political prisoners here. And they have actually active, and by the support of Guillermo Morales and Asada Shakur and other political prisoners who have exiled in Cuba, they've not just talked about political prisoners in this country, they have evidence as to their support of the political prisoners. And you all know the Pope, and even when the New Jersey State police officer, Colonel Order Police, asked the Pope to intercede with Castro to return Asada Shakur back to this country, the Pope went to Havana and came back, and Assad is still free in Cuba. And so that kind of situation support, and what we have to do is do our job here. And it's very clear is that those countries cannot stand up and support our political prisoners if we don't build a movement in this country in support of our own political prisoners. And so we have to do the job of making it to their benefit to stand up for us by us standing up for ourselves. Yeah.
Safiya Bukhari Alston was a political prisoner for almost 9 years as a result of her involvement in the Black Liberation Army, a revolutionary group that evolved out of the Black Panther Party of the 1960s. Safiya now spends most of her time working with Black youth in the community, specifically addressing the issues of Black imprisonment. She focuses both on the situation of political prisoners and the conditions of confinement, especially within the New York State control units. We were fortunate to have Safiya as a panelist in our afternoon workshop, and we are thrilled to have the opportunity to hear from her once again this evening. Please give Safiya a big hand.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
The revolution in our lifetime.
Right on.
Or revolution from one generation to the next. I didn't write anything for this evening because I had to say I spent this afternoon. But I would like to talk a minute about, because when as I look out in the audience, what I see is organizers. I see people who have been struggling for a while, and this is a rally. And a rally, the purpose of a rally is to motivate, arouse, and get people feeling good so they can go out and continue to struggle. So they can feel like, I can go out and spend 10 more days at this. And then we come back and get empowered again. And I get more gas, that fiery gas that they put in and allow me to get 20 miles per gallon instead of that 10 miles per gallon. When I first came into the Black Panther Party in 1969, I came in during the Free Huey movement. And the whole struggle that began and propelled the party across the country was geared around freeing Huey Newtons. In New York, it was around freeing the Path of 21, but it was still around building an organization that could free Huey Newton and using the issues that affect the black community as a basis for organizing. Using the 10-point programming platform, which was the basic needs of people to educate to them that the reason why Huey and the 21 and all of them were in prison was because they were about self-determination for black people. They were about full employment for black people. They were about decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. They were about decent education that teaches us our true history, stopping police brutality, stopping black men being going off to fight in foreign wars and coming back to be becoming third-class citizens. People say second class, but before you get to be second class, we're at the bottom, so you're not even second class yet. So, the freeing people, black men, women, and children from prisons because they hadn't received fair trials, and on and on and on, not being allowed to fight in military services. And this is the reason why the Black Panther Party became a national organization, because it dealt with the issues that affect the masses of black and oppressed people. The reason why the Black Panther Party was destroyed was because of the fact that it was organized around concrete issues. And it was not afraid to say that in order to get them off our backs, get them off our necks, that we had to go out and take them off. They can't act them. We had to take them off our necks. Now, I came into the Black Panther Party understanding with a incorrect analysis, thinking that the Black Panther Party was only one talking about what was happening out there. In 1971, I ran into the Republic of Africa, which was founded in 1968, and they were talking about a provisional government and declaring the independence of the United States and declaring their right citizens of the Republic of Africa. The whole land question. Because independence is based on land. And if you don't have any land, you can't have independence. The provisional government was talking about, first, a lot of strategies I didn't agree with, but at the concept of a provisional government, I agreed with. That if you're not going to be free by going along with the status quo, you have to separate yourself from that enemy and tell him he doesn't have the authority to do anything to make you follow his laws, because his laws were made for you in the first place. So, naturally, it made sense to me. So I ran right down to the RNA and became a citizen. So now I'm a member of the Black Panther Party, which was a paramilitary black organization whose primary objective was to establish revolutionary political power for black people, who believed that political power rolled out of the barrel of a gun because the vote just didn't count for black people. And then I went one step further and decided that they were not going to tell me I was a citizen and then treat me like I was a dirt under their feet. I was going to make a determination of whether I was going to be a citizen or not. I decided I didn't want to be one. Quite naturally, they didn't take this lightly. It's understood. Because, but then I took a lesson from the history books. And their Declaration of Independence says whenever a government abuses and the rights of the people, it's the right of that people to throw off that government and institute a new government that works for the people, of the people, and by the people. What are we talking here? We're talking about revolution. We're talking about sedition. We're talking about treason according to their law. They don't want to hear that. So what did they decide? They used COINTELPRO to counterintelligence for you, those of you. And that's understandable because nobody wants to, is going to sit quietly by and allow anybody to destroy their thing. So it was like me sitting in somebody's house talking about how I'm going to kick them out of their own house and take their house from them. If they knew anything about it, right next to it, they're going to be trying to make sure I didn't do it. So I don't fault them for COINTELPRO because I've been trying to stop them too. What I fault them for, and I to get away with it. Now, the very first time I got arrested, since now I've already set the stage, the law didn't affect me because they weren't ready for me. So when they arrested members of the Black Panther Party, one of my first things was to try to get them out of there. While the lawyers were dealing with the courts, and they were doing their thing, because that's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to go to trial and have the legal end. Those of us who were about revolution, who didn't recognize their right to have them in the first place, was about getting going and then getting them. So the very first arrest I took was for trying to break out 6 BLA members out of the New York tomb, in New York. They called it the Great Tomb Escape. When they caught me, they put a $10,000 contract on us because they couldn't get us tried in New York on that. So they put a $10,000 contract out that I wasn't supposed to be arrested. I was supposed to be got in a position to have to be killed on sight. And who told us? While we organizing, let's get step back. While we're organizing, we cannot allow ourselves to just organize those people who are about the same things we're about. We have to organize a fifth column from within. The same way they go infiltrate us, we have to infiltrate them. The organization has to have, organizing has to happen on all levels. From the churches, from the schools, from the police departments, because they're black and Puerto Rican and Latino peoples and inside those institutions also. They don't like what's happening there. The correction officers, they in our communities. We have to organize them too. So they're somebody's brothers and sisters, and they're somebody's mothers too, and fathers. So our organizing, we have to get sophisticated enough to organize on all those levels. Because they're the ones who can give us the information that we need in order to get things done. We cannot. We have to learn from revolutions from all around the world. We didn't just organize those people into little cliques and little groups. And because I don't like that, what they're about, I'm not going to talk to them and organize them. The masses of the people mean the masses of the people. It does not mean just those people we like. So, who told me about the $10,000 contract? Members of the New York Guardian Society, the black police in New York, who did not go along with that. I'll never tell who they were, but they were the ones who told me. So we got up and left, and so other folks tried to get into the tombs, because then I heard they had a Black Liberation Army Navy. While I was going to run underground, they were, oh, we have to use all our skills. We have to use those technical skills because this is a technical society. Anyway, so we ended up in Virginia, in a shootout, ended up captured, and we watched trials and trials and trials where people were saying we didn't do it, we didn't think about doing it, and they were a lot of people actually go to trial because they were teaching, using trials as political arenas to teach about what the court system was like. We already figured, my co-defendants and I, in our unit, which is called Homicide Collective of the Black Liberation Army, we had decided that we were going to take a prisoner of war position. That the courts of the United States did not have the jurisdiction to try us, and we were not going to sit back and allow them to make us subject to them because we weren't. So they tried us in one day. They picked the jury, tried us, convicted us, and took us all to jail in one day. Sentenced us and took us off to jail all in one day. They were out to make a statement that they were to make an example out of us. Throughout our incarceration, we decided we were going to make a statement and make an example for the community of what being a prisoner of war was all about. The very first, even before we got arrested, we had decided that the first thing we were going to do was try to get out of here. That was what we were supposed to be about. As prisoners of war. Under UN Geneva Convention, the responsibility of POW is to escape. That's what they teach you in the U.S. Army. If you can't, you try to escape. I got laryngitis. Well, anyway, so I escaped. warden took it as a personal. She took it very personal. Because she said I was a model prisoner. Why was I a model prisoner? Because I went into prison with an objective, to escape. So I didn't have time to get into the petty things in prison. You know, because I had one objective to escape. And I told them, when they came, they brought me into prison at night, put me in night security, told me there won't no empty cell line population. So for 21 days, I stayed in night security while they tried to find me a cell. Then they told me I couldn't go to population because they were scared I was organized the population. Then they told me that they didn't have enough security for me, so they signed a guard when they finally let me out to walk around the prison with me all the time. And inside the premises of the institution, this man carried a gun. And it was just me. The only one went into prison in Virginia was custody, closed custody. And so they couldn't find nothing for me to do. I couldn't work in the laundry because there was too many doors. I couldn't work in the kitchen because there was too many knives. And therefore I had to work on the tier so I can just sweep. And they didn't really want me to do that because I was out of myself. But anyway, they said so before they let me out, they sent this correctional officer down to find out, so she could talk to me to find out whether she wanted me on her tier. And she asked me what was my intentions, and I told her I was going to be here 2 years and I was gone. One of the things that was clear to me from the very beginning is they do not believe, when you tell the truth, they don't believe you. So I told the truth. December 31st, 1976, I escaped. 24 days shy of 2 years that I spent in prison in Virginia from the time of my arrest to the time of my escape. 24 days short of 2 years. Then they were trying to blue because it was a personal trial, as I said. Now, I say all of this to say, when I came out after doing that 8 years and 8 months, when I went before the parole board, the first thing they asked me was whether I was going to be in touch with my associates. And I told them I couldn't help but be associated with them because they were family, they weren't associates. And regardless of what I do, I'm going to be involved with them because they're family. And I had a responsibility to my family. I didn't think they were going to let me go. But then I found out they wanted me out of their state because I was costing them too much money. That's where you heard about is in their pocket. And coming back to New York, they set conditions when I made the roll that I could not visit or correspond with anybody in prison. And I couldn't touch a gun. Okay, I can live without touching a gun. At that point. But I could not deal with not visiting my comrades in prison, my family in prison, going down to the courts to see what was happening with them, and inviting them while they were in prison. I didn't think that they had the right to tell me I couldn't do that. So I did it anyhow. And the reason why I did it is because those people in prison, by old parole at that time, I could be right back again in prison on a hummer, just like that. Because parole is just extended prison. Being out in the streets, in the community, is just one step away from prison. Anytime you organize, you're throwing bricks at the penitentiary. Because conspiracy, the conspiracy laws, the RICO law, and everything is just anytime they can drop that on you and you can be in there. So it's imperative that as organizers, as revolutionaries, as people dedicated to Puerto Rican conclusion. Where do we go from here? We go back to our communities with a new commitment to move the struggle forward. We go back to our communities with a new dedication to building a movement grounded in concrete work designed to throw off the shackles of oppression. We go back to our communities with a new reaffirmation of our determination to tear down the walls of America's prisons with the knowledge that when the prison doors are open, the real dragons will fly out.
Before I introduce the final dragon of the evening, I'd like you to all notice that we are about to pass the hat, right? Yeah. Are we about to pass the hat? Oh, it's not a hat, but if you can afford to, please dig in your pockets and give us some of that quiet-sounding material. We'll also take the jangling kind if you haven't got the purse. Your contributions will be an enormous help in this work. And as I look out at everybody in the audience, I'm hoping that you will figure out other ways to contribute to the campaign to abolish control units. We know that you have many different skills, many different areas of expertise. And we hope that you will sign our lists that are going around that look something like this. And maybe I could have a number of different videos, and we're willing to speak to any group, large or small. We like large better, but we also like small. And we hope that you will write to the prisoners. We have on our literature table a list of prisoners at Marion in particular. And with the holiday season coming up, it's a particularly good time to be writing into the prison. And we have names and addresses out there. We hope you can think of other ways that you can help contribute to this campaign. The other thing that I wanted to say before we go on is that political prisoner Alan Bergman, who many of you know about, is fighting for his life right now. He's fighting against Hodgkin's disease, but he's fighting it within the prison system. And they are really trying to kill him. Alan is definitely eligible for parole. There's no reason why they can't grant him that parole, but they continue to refuse to do that. I visited him a few weeks ago, and he was in the locked ward of the D.C. jail. And it's interesting that after hearing Safiya speak about correctional personnel, because although from what we can understand about Marion, there's not too many people who are guards at Marion that are organizing material. And I think that, has to do with the nature of the Federal Bureau of Prisons in particular, and the kind of people that they have trained systematically to work there. But actually in the D.C. hospital on the locked ward, it's almost entirely black. And it's a black hospital in a black community. And when we were sitting outside waiting to visit Alan, we were talking to the woman guard. And we were asking if he got a lot of visits, and she said, he got some. She said, but we all visit him every day, and we talk to him, and we love him very much. He's a very wonderful person. And we said, well, somebody up there doesn't love him very much. She said, yes, I know, and if I could do something to change that, I would. Now, this doesn't change the quality of the care that he is receiving. He is not receiving care that will ensure his future health or his future life. And we wanted to announce a demonstration that's going to take place here on November 29th at 4:30 down at the Federal Building at Jackson and Dearborn for all those people from Chicago who could join us in that.